Back in the summer I posted a video showing you my new power rack that I built during the summer break, and it received quite a lot of positive comments, so thank you for all of those nice things that people have said in the comments section of that previous video. A few people have asked me for measurements and also for dimensions of the power rack, so I thought I'd do a couple of videos just to show you how I built the rack in a bit more detail. I've posted a lot of the information online. There's a link in the description to this video where I've posted dimensions for the J-cup slots, for the power rack itself, and also the hole sizes for the safety pins and the J-cups themselves. Since I built the power rack, I've added a number of other features to it, including the row pulley system, obviously the bench, and there's a few attachments for the TRX as well. So I'll do another video explaining how I built those and how those work, so you can add to your power rack after you've built the main structure. So if you fancy building yourself a power rack based on this design, good luck. I hope it goes well. I hope my tips help. If you have any questions, then let me know and I'll respond as soon as possible. So let's get on with it. So the first thing to do is to buy all your timber, all the big timber, 3.5 by 3.5 inches. Buy yourself the screws for putting the angle brackets on, and also the screws for the wooden brackets. They are different sizes, so just get the right size there. I think you need to set yourself up with a miter saw to do all the cuts, and preferably have a drill press as well to do the holes. When you buy all of this wood, you'll find a lot of it is quite poor quality. Modern day wood tends to be quite warped and not particularly good for building a nice square power rack. But do your best, find the straightest wood you can with as few warps and twists and as few knots as you can. But ultimately you will have to accept that there will be some warping, and you just have to make the best of it when you come to construct it. You should find with all the structure that you're building that you should be able to bend any warped wood back into shape, as long as it's not too twisted and out of shape. So once you've bought your wood, bring it home and cut all the main pieces. The measurements are all online, but just to quickly run through it, the 4 main posts are 215 centimeters tall, top to bottom, nice and easy. Cut those off square. You've got 4 sections here, 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom, that hold the front and the back together. They're 80 centimeters in length. Again, fairly straightforward, just cut those off square. You've got the front and the back posts here, which are 42 inches, which is a bit confusing, I know, but that's because the total width of the rack needs to be 49 inches to match the rogue dimensions. So with the wood being 3.5 and 3.5, the 2 posts here being 3.5 inches each, that's 7 inches. And then you've got another 42 inches for this piece of wood at the front. That's the only piece I think that's in Imperial, but that's 42 inches wide for these 2 bits of wood. So cut those, and then you've got to cut these bits here which support all of the frame. These are, I think there's 16 of these in total. I put the measurements online, but they're basically cut at 45-degree angles. I think it's 17 centimeters for the long length and 9 centimeters for the short length. And then the bits of wood that support the power rack against the wall, I'd suggest you cut those at the end. I think they're 35 centimeters long in my design, but I would wait until you got the rack up and then cut them at the end, just to make sure that you can get a nice tight fit with that. Okay, so you've cut your wood to size. The next job after you've done that is to cut the holes for the J-cups and for the safety pins. And the most important thing to remember is that this design is based on wood pillars that are 3.5 inches wide. These J-cups are for a steel framed power rack which is only 3 inches wide, and you have to make allowance for that when you cut the holes in the wood. And by that I mean you have to slightly offset these holes just to one side so that the J-cups can fit onto the outside of each post. So if you imagine here, the 3-inch steel frame power rack would be just where this left edge of the J-cup is. So you have to drill the hole for the J-cup in the centre here. Now obviously because it's 3 inches wide, the centre of this hole needs to be 1.5 inches from this outside edge of the post, and it's the same on the other side, although obviously it's because it's on the left hand side, it'll be 1.5 inches from the left hand side of the post, whereas the right hand post, it's 1.5 inches in from the right hand side of the post. So if you drill your hole 1.5 inches in here, then the J-cups can just slide in nicely, nice and snug. I suggest you drill the holes for the front post and the back post at the same time. The only difference between the two, the front post and the back post, is that I haven't got any holes for J-cups in the front post, so there's more holes to drill in the back posts. The holes are 18 millimeters in diameter. That's wide enough for you to put the safety pins through and also use the holes for J-cups, provided you've got the slot here at the back. There are two main ways to drill the holes. The first is using a Forstner bit, which is the method I was recommended and I used. This was good. It made a very, very clean cut here. The main disadvantage with this I found, and maybe you can solve it by buying a Forstner bit with a longer shaft, but the major issue I had was that because the shaft was quite small, it wouldn't go all the way through the wood, so I ended up having to mark a hole on the other side and drill that in that direction, and that created some difficulty because it's very difficult matching up the two holes from either side. One way to solve this is to use one of these spade bits, which I said in my previous video I wouldn't recommend, but having thought about it a bit and experimented, actually I think it would work quite well. You probably, if you're careful, can get quite a clean cut, and because the shaft is longer on these generally, they can go all the way through without too much trouble. Although obviously it's best just to drill from the other side when the point goes through so that you don't end up with a rough edge on the other side. One issue you'll have to think about is how you're going to get these holes straight. It's very easy if you drill it by hand for you to drill it at an angle, and that's going to cause problems both with the J-cups and with the safety pins. It's very important for the J-cups that these holes are absolutely straight through the wood. The best way of getting these holes straight is to use a drill press. I think you'll get yourself into real problems if you try and do it by hand. I wouldn't recommend that at all. So get yourself a drill press if you can, or find some way of rigging up your drill so you get the holes absolutely perpendicular through the wood. Right, so you've drilled your holes. Be patient, it takes a bit of time, but you've done that now. The next job to do is to drill these slots here for the J-cups, so that the J-cups can slide in and then slide into the slot there nice and neat. This is probably the most difficult piece of the whole build. Getting these slots cut is potentially tricky and takes a bit of skill with a router. So there are a few other ways of solving this problem. One is to just cut the wood at the back and don't try and route it out at all. Just cut a piece of section of wood out here and chisel it out, and then that will mean that the J-cup can just slide in behind. I didn't want to do that because it obviously doesn't look as neat as having it routed out as a slot. The other solution is to buy smaller wood. Again, I didn't want to do that because I thought 3.5 inch square wood would be strong enough. I'm not sure how strong 3-inch wood would be, but maybe it will work, don't know. So anyway, my design is based on having holes routed. The first thing you have to do is measure the slots and mark them on the wood. All of the measurements that I used are posted on the instructions online, and I suggest you use those, but as a double check, once you've marked out each of the areas that you're going to cut out of the wood for the slots, what you should do is put the J-cup in the hole like this, and you'll see here the entry point here is slightly wider, the slot, than the actual final finish. So you'll see here you need to have a slight clearance here to allow the section of the J-cup there to slot in. These are 8mm, this bit of wood here is 8mm, and the width of the slots are 10mm. But as I say, always put the J-cup in and measure it in real life, just to make sure that those measurements work okay. So in terms of cutting the holes, the method I used was to get a fairly standard 9.5mm, I think 9.5, 10mm router bit, and just route out the first part of the hole. Once I'd cut enough waste out of the wood, I could then use a much longer router bit to cut out the full depth that I needed of 80mm, which is quite a long way through the wood. Now this wasn't really long enough because I had to put it right at the end of the shaft, which created a bit of vibration, a bit of heat. You can see the router bit got a bit black and messy here. So it wasn't easy to do and it wasn't a perfect solution. I think perhaps with hindsight what I might do if I did it again was route out the top section with the 10mm or 9.5mm router bit here, just to give a nice clean edge on the bit that you can see, and then possibly get just a normal drill out all of the wood all the way down, and then maybe chisel some of it out, because you can't really see the wood inside there, and it doesn't matter if it's not quite as clean a finish. I did have a few problems with this router. It got quite hot, there's quite a lot of smoke, but it did the job in the end. Now, one very important thing you must remember when you're doing these slots is not to cut two identical back posts. If you do that, you'll end up with two right-hand posts or two left-hand posts. What you need to do and must remember is that these posts are mirrored. Although they're the same measurements, they're on opposite sides of the wood. So you'll see here this slot for the right-hand post is on the right-hand side of the wood, and obviously for the left post you need to do the slot on the left-hand side of the wood. So don't, whatever you do, cut two posts identical, because you'll find actually it won't work. You'll have this right-hand post with the slot on the right-hand side, and then you'll have a right-hand side slot for the left-hand post, which isn't what you want. So just bear that in mind all the time, that the J-cups always fit on to the outside of each post, like so. So in this video we've learned how to cut the wood, we've learned how to cut the holes and do the slots for the J-cups. That's probably enough for this video, so we'll end it there, but if you join me next time, we'll learn how to fit the pull-up bar, the flooring, and put the whole rack together. See you next time.